They told me I wasn't even listed as family. Then a lawyer read the will, and the whole room gasped. I didn't flinch. When you've been erased long enough, silence becomes a shield. So I signed the papers she left behind, without a word, and watched everything shift in one breath. But that was only the beginning. You haven't heard what she left hidden, or who tried to stop it. Before we dive deeper, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment. Tell us where you're watching from. The house was quiet in the way only an old house could be. Every sound had its own echo. The refrigerator hummed steadily, and the wall clock ticked loud against the silence. Each second counted out in deliberate protest. A thin layer of dust coated the edges of the windowsill, illuminated by the pale morning light of Spokane in late April. Outside, birds chirped over puddles left by last night's rain, but inside, everything stood still. A stillness that wasn't peaceful, just resigned. I sat at the small kitchen table, folding the sympathy card into the envelope with more care than it probably deserved. The funeral wreath, ordered 2 days ago, had been simple: white lilies and pale blue hydrangeas. A ribbon reading, "With respect, Lowell." Nothing dramatic, nothing assuming, just enough. Or so I thought. The phone buzzed. "Hello?" My voice still croaked first thing in the morning. "Mr. Brancato?" It was the florist. "I'm calling about your order. The wreath. It was returned. The family declined to accept it." Silence. "They said it wasn't appropriate," she added softly. I didn't know what stung more, the fact that it was sent back, or that someone, probably Melora, made the decision on behalf of an entire family that once included me. "Thank you," I managed. "I understand. Of course I didn't." But I wasn't about to explain to a stranger that my ex-wife, Brielle, had passed away, and that somehow, even in death, there was a gate around her grief, and I was left standing outside. I hung up and stared at the phone. No missed calls, no messages. I tried Clayton, my son, straight to voicemail. Again. The last time Melora had spoken to me directly was 2 years ago. During that tense Thanksgiving, we weren't supposed to share. She'd looked at me over her wine glass and said, "You're just an old chapter in her book. It's closed." I hadn't responded then. I regretted that now. The memories of Brielle and I weren't always pleasant, but they were ours, and now even my right to grieve was being rewritten. The last real conversation I had with Brielle was over a decade ago. It had been stiff, full of pauses, each of us too proud to ask the question we both wanted answered. What happened to us? She had moved on, professionally, socially. Her business bloomed. Melora, her daughter-in-law, became a fixture in every photo op and boardroom announcement. And me? I retired from the utilities department, bought a small one-bedroom just outside city limits, fixed the mailbox, paid bills on time, fade to gray, but not today. By noon, I was standing outside the chapel, early enough to avoid a crowd, but late enough to be noticed. Luxury vehicles lined the entrance. Lexuses, a sleek Tesla, a Cadillac with out-of-state plates. People stepped out in dark coats, designer handbags, pressed suits. The men shook hands like they'd never known Brielle except through headlines. I stood a few feet back, feeling the pavement under my shoes, grounding me. Then I saw her, Melora, polished, poised, hair perfectly pinned. She noticed me immediately, veered my way, smile tight as wire. "Relax, old man," she said under her breath, stepping close enough for no one else to hear. "There's nothing here for you." I didn't answer. Murmurs followed me as I entered. Some guests glanced over their shoulders. Others whispered without shame. No one offered a hand. No one said my name. I found a seat in the back corner, near the exit. A young usher approached hesitantly. "Name?" "Lowell Brancato." He blinked, scanned the list. Then again, "You're not on the guest registry, sir." "I'll sit quietly," I said, folding my hands. He nodded, stepping aside. The memorial program was thick, glossy, the kind you might hand out at a corporate gala. I scanned the back page. Family acknowledgements, contributors, guest speakers. My name wasn't there, not even as former spouse. No recognition, no history. It wasn't a simple omission, it was erasure. As the organist began to play, I clutched the program a little tighter. Up front, Clayton sat beside Melora, their daughter between them, all dressed impeccably, his posture perfect. Expression unreadable. The same son I taught to ride a bike, taught to patch drywall. Now, he didn't look back. Not once. There was something deeper going on. I wasn't just being forgotten, I was being removed. The chapel was quieter than I expected, just the soft rustle of programs and the occasional cough echoing off the high wooden beams. I walked slowly along the outer aisle, deliberately keeping to the margins. There were tables lined with flower arrangements and framed photographs near the front, curated carefully, like a museum exhibit. As I approached, something inside me paused. The main collage, centered beneath a silk banner that read "Celebrating a Legacy," was filled with photos from Brielle's rise to success, corporate galas, charity galas, award ceremonies, vacation homes with people I'd never met. I leaned closer. There were photos of Brielle and Clayton. Of course, Brielle and Melora, hand in hand cutting a ribbon. Even one of her with a senator, both laughing under bright lights. But the space where our wedding photo used to be, a moment I remembered vividly, snow still clinging to her curls, her mother's pearls glinting in the morning sun, was gone. The frame wasn't empty. It had been filled with a more recent image. Brielle in a red dress, Melora by her side, Emery in front, the perfect three-generational portrait, like we had never existed. I didn't touch the frame, just stared. "Lowell?" Melora's voice floated behind me, sweet and sharp, like glass dipped in honey. I turned. She was already smiling, hands clasped in front of her. "Oh, that old wedding picture. It must have fallen out. Or someone moved it. These things happen, right?" I didn't answer. She stepped beside me, gaze following mine. "We wanted the display to have clarity, focus. This one just fits better with the rest." She gestured to the polished row of images. "It's the story people remember." I looked at her, not with anger, just understanding. Every photo was recent, glossy, and deliberate. The narrative had been set. I stepped away without a word. As I made my way to find a seat, a young usher intercepted me. "Excuse me, sir, may I help you?" "Lowell Brancato." He checked his tablet, scrolling through the list. His brows knit. "I don't see your name under family or extended guest list." "One moment." He turned, murmured something to an older gentleman in a black suit. They looked at me. I didn't flinch. Finally, the usher returned. "We can seat you in the side section, over here." He led me down a different aisle, away from the pews directly facing the pulpit. I was guided to a seat near the side wall, one row up from the restroom door. It smelled faintly of lavender cleaner. No one sat next to me. Guests passed with averted eyes. Some recognized me. I could tell by the flicker of hesitation, but none greeted me, not even with a nod. I sat down, back straight. The service began with orchestral strings, something elegant, too elegant. A slideshow rolled across the screen above the pulpit. Childhood pictures of Brielle, her college graduation, first press photo, ribbon cuttings, a mock-up of her TED Talk with the quote, "Build what you believe in, then teach others to believe too." Not a single image from our 20-year marriage, not one. The pastor began to speak. Brielle Chen Brancato Flores was a force of nature. My hands rested in my lap, clutching the program. Her legacy had been rebranded, her story rewritten. Everything before the money, before the spotlight, had been sanded away. They spoke of her determination, her brilliance, her leadership. They referenced those who supported her along the way, and pointedly named Melora and Clayton as cornerstones of her journey. I watched it all from the periphery, as if through glass, no mention of me, not even a former husband. It was as if I'd never been. Snowflakes, pearls, the smell of lavender from our wedding chapel, that belonged to no one now but me. That day so many years ago, it had snowed gently. I remember her breath turning to steam as she laughed outside the church, cheeks pink, bouquet trembling slightly in her grip. We'd taken that photo just before the vows. She looked radiant. That same photo had hung in our hallway for 20 years. I'd packed it in a box after the divorce and stored it. Never quite sure why I kept it. Now I understood. They weren't just erasing me from this room. They were erasing me from history. The silence that greeted me at home wasn't new, but it cut deeper that night. The key clicked in the lock. The door creaked open, and nothing waited on the other side. No lights left on. No voice calling from the kitchen. Just the low hum of the refrigerator and the faint scent of the laundry I never folded last week. I loosened my tie and hung my jacket on the back of a chair. The memorial program slipped from the inside pocket and landed softly on the table. Its glossy finish caught the lamplight, the same polished gleam that had erased me earlier today. I sat on the edge of the bed, shoes still on, eyes fixed on the far wall. That room, my room, felt like a waiting space, not a home. The kind of place you pass through when there's nowhere else to go. My gaze drifted to the box in the corner, a faded cardboard container, scrawled in Sharpie, "Garage, junk." Melora had tossed it at me the last time I saw her outside Brielle's house. "Stuff from the old place. Thought you'd want your treasures." Back then, I didn't open it. Tonight, I did. Inside were receipts from the 90s, a cracked mug from a company picnic, and folded cards from birthdays long past. I almost closed the lid until I saw the envelope. It was thick, wrinkled around the edges. On the front, written in big, lopsided crayon, "Dad, 2001. I pulled it open with careful fingers. Inside, a single page, lined notebook paper, yellowed with time. The writing slanted upward, pressed hard by a child who didn't yet know how to hold back emotion. "Dear Dad, when I grow up, I want to be just like you. You fix things and never yell. You take me fishing even when I'm cranky. I'm gonna get a job and buy you a truck. Love, Clayton, age 8. There was a drawing, too. 2 stick figures by a lake, one with glasses, the other holding a fishing rod that curved impossibly toward a bright orange fish. It hit harder than I expected. That boy, he was mine once. I leaned back, holding the letter with both hands, staring at it like a relic. Somewhere along the way, that boy became a man who wouldn't return my calls. A man who sat at his mother's funeral and didn't glance once in my direction. But this was before. A knock against the past pulled me further in. Beneath the letter was a photo, Clayton's 11th birthday. I remembered the party. Brielle had hosted it in our backyard. Balloons tied to the fence, cake with plastic dinosaurs on top. In the picture, Clayton was opening a gift, some Lego set he'd begged for. I stood at the edge of the frame, smiling, almost cropped out. That same photo hadn't made the memorial wall. Another quiet deletion. I set it aside and continued digging. There was another envelope, buried under old tax forms, thicker paper, neater script. Lowell, it read. Just that. My name, in Brielle's handwriting. The postmark was from 9 months ago. I opened it carefully, heart already bracing for what might be inside. The letter was short. "Lowell, I don't want to go without making peace. If you'd still talk to me, write back. B." That was it. No flowery apologies, no long explanations, just a door cracked open. But the envelope was already slit before I touched it. The seal had been broken and carefully glued again. My stomach dropped. I picked up the phone and dialed the return address. The P.O. box number. Disconnected. The mailbox had been closed for months. She'd reached out, and I'd never known. Someone had read it first. Someone had made sure it never reached me in time. Melora. It had to be. Why else would the letter be in a box she labeled junk? I sat with both letters in my lap, the one from the boy who once adored me, and the one from the woman who once loved me enough to try, even at the end. One was a beginning, the other, a missed chance. You tried, I whispered into the quiet, voice cracking like an old floorboard, and she didn't let it happen. The reception line moved like a lazy river, slow, conversational, too comfortable for a funeral. The clink of glassware echoed faintly as guests filtered into the adjacent reception area, exchanging polished anecdotes and air kisses. I stood at the edge of the crowd, unsure if I was expected to follow. I lingered near a table of hors d'oeuvres I had no intention of touching. The scent of white wine and prosciutto hovered in the air. Voices around me rose and fell like background music at a business mixer. Then came the tap on my shoulder. I turned slowly. A well-dressed woman, probably in her 60s, wearing a designer scarf and the confident smile of someone used to cocktail hours, looked at me curiously. "Excuse me," she asked. "Are you staff?" I met her gaze for a second. No recognition on her face. Just the assumption that a man in a modest gray suit standing alone couldn't possibly belong. I nodded, just slightly, and stepped away. She thanked me and moved on, never knowing, or maybe she did. At the far end of the room, away from the buzz of catered platters and polite condolences, sat a single table draped in white linen. A small sign in gold script read, "Please sign the guest book." I approached it slowly. Next to the open book was a framed photo of Brielle, mid-speech at a gala, microphone in hand, eyes alive. The image had become part of her public persona, almost like a logo. Not the Brielle who used to garden in a floppy straw hat, humming Fleetwood Mac under her breath. I picked up the pen, hovered over the page. Should I even write my name? After a moment, I did. Just Lowell Brancato. No message. Then I flipped back through the earlier entries, curious about who had come before me. There were the expected things. A true visionary. She changed lives. Grateful to have known her. But one message stood out. No name. Thank you for believing in her before any of us did. Anonymous. I stared at it longer than I meant to. The letters were neat, slanted. Someone who wrote carefully, not for show, but with purpose. It wasn't signed, yet somehow it felt directed at me. A thread of warmth pulled taut in my chest. I turned, scanning the room, not looking for anything in particular, just someone watching me the way I was watching them. That's when Melora approached. "You don't seem to know many people here anymore," she said lightly, brushing a crumb from her sleeve. I didn't answer right away. Then, without meeting her eyes, I said, "No." But they seemed to know how to forget. She gave a soft laugh, tight-lipped and joyless, then drifted back into the crowd. I moved toward the door. The afternoon light was softer now, slipping through the clouds as the sun sank behind the hills. Outside, in the parking lot, guests milled around in small clusters, laughing quietly, posing for photos as if this were a garden party. I leaned against the side of my car. It looked smaller somehow, dwarfed between a black Tesla and a gleaming Lexus with Oregon plates. The contrast was almost comical. A few feet away, someone was recounting a story about Brielle at a tech conference in San Diego. She absolutely owned the stage. A man chuckled. They weren't wrong, but they didn't know all of her. I almost reached for the door handle when I noticed her, an older woman, maybe late 70s, wearing a lavender shawl and sensible shoes. She walked toward me slowly, face kind but unreadable. She didn't introduce herself, just held out a small, folded square of paper. "I think you should have this," she said softly. She kept it in her office drawer. I opened it carefully. A photo. Brielle and I. Mid-laugh, sitting on a picnic blanket in our 20s, her head thrown back, my hand resting lightly over hers. Not posed, not polished, real. She never threw it out, the woman added. Then she walked away. No name. No explanation. I stood there for a long while, the photo in one hand, the anonymous guestbook message playing again in my mind. Two reminders that I hadn't been completely erased. Not yet. The sky had shifted to a bruised lavender by the time I slid into the driver's seat. The reception was still going, laughter filtering through the chapel's open doors. A few guests lingered outside, sipping wine as though the day had been a reunion, not a farewell. From the windshield, I watched Clayton emerge. He was flanked by two men in tailored suits, shaking hands, nodding at some joke I couldn't hear. His smile was polite, practiced, curved just enough to seem warm, held just long enough to be professional. He adjusted his cufflink with the precision of a man trained to speak without saying anything real. Then his eyes met mine, only for a second. He looked away almost instantly, tightening his jaw before returning to his conversation. His hands moved as he spoke, expressive and careful, like Brielle's when she was winning an argument. I gripped the steering wheel, the leather warm under my palms. It took me back. The day Clayton moved out, nearly 20 years ago, he didn't say goodbye, just left a note on the kitchen table. "Don't wait up. I'll come for the rest later." That was all. I hadn't chased him. I'd told myself it was because he needed space, that a clean break would hurt less. Truth was, I didn't know how to talk to him anymore without making things worse. I thought silence was a kind of love, giving him the dignity of his own anger, the right to his version of the story. But standing here now, watching him ignore me like a stranger, I wondered if that silence had only built a wall he learned to decorate with distance. I reached for the ignition. "Grandpa?" The voice was soft, small. I turned. Emery stood beside the passenger door, arms crossed over a juice box, her dress wrinkled from sitting too long. Her eyes darted toward the chapel, then back to me. "Mom said not to talk to you," she whispered, "but I miss you." My throat tightened. I opened the door and stepped out slowly, careful not to startle her. She looked older than the last time I saw her, taller, but her mouth was still shaped like Clayton's at that age, always slightly open, as if on the verge of a question. "I miss you too, sweetheart," I said, kneeling beside her. "Every day." She blinked, then gave a shy smile. "Do you still have the ducks in your pond?" "I do." "Do they still follow you?" "Not as often. They got smart about who has bread." She laughed, covering her mouth like she'd done something wrong. I reached out, gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You're getting so big." "I'm 9, she said proudly. Almost double digits. I was about to ask if she still liked puzzles when the sound of heels interrupted us. Melora. She appeared like a storm cloud, expression tight, arms stiff at her sides. "Emery," she said sharply. "Get in the car." Emery froze. Melora didn't move, just stared at me like I was a smudge she'd found on crystal glassware. "You had your moment," she said. "Don't confuse her." I stood slowly, meeting her gaze. Truth doesn't confuse children. Secrets do. Her jaw tensed. She didn't respond, just held the door open as Emery slipped inside. Then Clayton appeared. He walked up, shoulders drawn but not slouched. Melora waited, poised for him to say something. He didn't. Not a word. Just a slight nod in my direction, more reflex than gesture, before sliding into the front seat. Melora didn't look back as the door closed. The car pulled out smoothly, its tinted windows swallowing the last glimpses of my granddaughter's eyes. I watched until the taillights disappeared down the winding path. The lot fell quiet again. For the first time, I wasn't sure if Clayton's silence had been his way of avoiding harm or of avoiding truth. The cardboard box was lighter than it looked, but it carried the weight of something much heavier. I held it against my side as I stepped through the front door, the porch light flickering once overhead like a weak protest. Set it down on the kitchen table. The label, scribbled in thick black Sharpie, said it plainly. Junk. Likely his. Melora's handwriting. I'd know it anywhere. Always a little sharp at the edges. Always in capital letters. Like she was trying to make sure her voice was louder on paper. I stood over it for a moment. Then I sat, not to open it, but just to look at it. The box didn't move, neither did I. Instead, I poured a cup of coffee, late for caffeine. But habit overrules logic when grief sets the schedule. I brought the cup back to the table and took the seat across from the box, as if we were two old opponents preparing for a final match. Next to it lay a sealed envelope from Quentin, the lawyer. I'd found it among the paperwork at the service. The label was odd, only to be opened if he refuses. I didn't know what refuse meant, but somehow she did. I didn't open that one either, not yet. I needed to know if I would have refused, if I still believed I should. I reached for the box and peeled back the flaps. Receipts, crinkled business cards, a half-used notepad from a motel we stayed at during our last road trip before the divorce, a cracked photo frame without the photo. It was exactly the sort of thing Melora would consider junk. But beneath the clutter, tucked between two old newspapers, I found a large envelope marked in Brielle's handwriting. Consulting Contract Draft, 1996. I opened it slowly, the paper inside stiff from time and storage. The first page was a scanned document, an early draft of the founding paperwork for Brielle's consulting firm. I skimmed until I found it. There, page 2, my signature, Lowell Brancato. It hit me like a slow-moving train, not sudden, just unstoppable. I had helped her register the firm. I'd lent her the $7,000 to cover licensing fees and legal help, telling her at the time, "It's just a formality. You'll get it back." I'd forgotten. She hadn't. That money had come from a severance check I received after a downsizing at the plant. I'd told no one, not even her, how close we were to running out of options. But she turned it into a beginning. She turned it into everything. My hands trembled as I set the contract aside. Only then did I reach for the lawyer's envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, Quentin's letterhead, Brielle's words. If Lowell refuses anything, it's because he still believes he doesn't deserve credit. Don't let him decline. Remind him how it started. No signature, no flourish, just that. She knew me. Even at the end. I leaned back in the chair, both the contract and the note resting on my lap. The kitchen clock ticked loudly. Somewhere outside, a siren whined in the distance before fading. She didn't forget, I said aloud. Not to anyone, not even to myself. I'd watched her rise. I'd watched the accolades. And I'd told myself it had nothing to do with me, that it was hers, and I had no right to claim a piece. But she knew different. I picked up the contract again, placed it in a folder from the drawer, and labeled it in black ink. Legacy. Not for revenge, but for record. If this ends in my hands, let it be because I finally accepted the truth. The message came mid-morning, just as I was reheating yesterday's coffee in the microwave. Mr. Brancato, this is a courtesy call from Morrison Trent Legal Group. You're requested to attend the Flores Consulting Board transition meeting today at 2 p.m. Attendance is required by stipulation. You are named. No warmth, no pause, just stated facts, carefully sanitized of emotion. I let the microwave finish its slow spin, the beep echoing too loud in the quiet kitchen. There was no time to press a shirt. I wore the same suit from the funeral, a little more wrinkled now, a little looser around the shoulders. I arrived downtown an hour early, unsure what to expect. The Flores building towered above the intersection like a polished monument to Brielle's determination. Sleek glass, brushed steel, a name etched in the entryway that once only existed in our kitchen conversations. "Hi," I said to the receptionist, offering my name. She glanced up from her monitor, her eyes trailing from my shoes to my tie, pausing just long enough to make me feel like I didn't belong. "I don't have you listed as a stakeholder, Mr. Brancato. It's for a board transition meeting," I said. She hesitated, tapped a few keys. "Please wait in the side lounge. We'll call someone to confirm. No badge, no guest sticker, just a vague nod toward a leather bench near a faux plant. I sat. Through the glass wall across the lobby, I saw Clayton arrive, confident, upright. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my first car. Melora was at his side, arm looped through his. Her red blazer caught the light, striking against the minimalist palette of the lobby. A young staff member approached them with a clipboard. "We'll begin your portion of the review in 5. I heard him say. Melora turned. Our eyes met. Her smile was slight, almost invisible, but the message was loud. "You're exactly where you belong, outside." I stayed in that seat for 30 minutes. I watched people pass, heard laughter down the corridor. At one point, a janitor offered me a sympathetic glance. That was the only acknowledgement I received. Eventually, I stood and walked to the reception desk. "Has there been an update?" I asked. A junior staffer I hadn't seen before stepped forward. He looked to be about Clayton's age, nervous in his blazer. "Sorry, sir, it's just, we weren't expecting you'd actually come." I didn't blink. "Your founder did." He swallowed and stepped back. Within minutes, the atmosphere shifted. Another lawyer, not Quentin, but someone sharp and pressed, whispered to the receptionist. Paperwork was shuffled. Screens were tapped. I was asked to wait again, but only briefly. This time, when they called me in, the doors opened wide. They didn't take me to the lounge or the hallway. They took me into the boardroom. The table was long, polished oak, 12 chairs, 11 occupied. I was led to the 12th, opposite the rest. Not beside, not behind, across. A leather folder sat in front of me. Legal documents. "Mr. Brancato," one of the lawyers began. "Your conditional rights require your presence to be activated, per Mrs. Flores's final amendments." No one smirked now. No one avoided my eyes. They looked at me, not as a relic or a mistake, but as someone whose signature still had weight. I opened the folder and picked up the pen. Didn't ask questions. Didn't offer a speech. I signed. They brought water this time. A chilled glass placed gently on a coaster in front of me. My name was printed on a folded card. The gesture wasn't kindness, it was protocol. But protocol, at least, acknowledged presence. Across the table, Clayton shifted in his seat like the cushion betrayed him. Melora's jaw remained tense, eyes forward, hands folded with military precision. Only her nails tapped, a slow, controlled rhythm. Quentin Raisler, sleeves buttoned tight, opened a dark leather folder and cleared his throat. "I will now read the final will and testament of Brielle Florence Brancato, as amended and executed under legal supervision on March 3rd of this year." A pause. Air thickened. "To my former husband, Lowell Anthony Brancato." Quentin read, steady and unshaken. "I leave $33.5 million, along with a 65% controlling stake in Flores Consulting Group and its subsidiaries." The words didn't register at first, not for me, but the room? The room shattered. A gasp from the far end of the table, a whispered curse. Someone exhaled sharply, as if struck. Clayton coughed into his hand, then blurted, "That has to be a mistake. You mean 13, not 33. Melora's voice sliced through his confusion. "This is a setup. There's no way she'd—" Her words trailed off, not from doubt, but because Quentin had continued reading, unaffected by the temperature drop in the room. "This distribution is to be effective immediately, subject to board review and legal implementation." He paused. "There is one final item. Mrs. Brancato prepared a personal letter to be read aloud in this setting." Clayton stood abruptly. "You can't be serious." "She was very specific," Quentin said. "She wanted you all to hear it." He unfolded a second page. "To Lowell," he began. "You never asked for credit. That's why you deserve it. I built a company, yes, but I built it on a foundation you gave me. You gave me space when I was suffocating, silence when I demanded noise, and trust when I hadn't earned it yet." I sat frozen, my name on her lips, even if through another's mouth, cracked something old inside me. You grounded me when I was losing myself in empire. You reminded me what the world outside this building looked like. You reminded me that love doesn't require press releases or valuations. Quentin paused. This company needed someone who knew what real responsibility was, not just to grow, but to protect. That's why I chose you. Clayton slammed a hand on the table. You poisoned her against us, he snapped. You let her die in silence, and now you show up to take her life's work like some vulture? No one followed him into his outrage. Not yet. Melora said nothing. Her lips pressed into a thin line. Her eyes flicked from me to the letter, to the papers in Quentin's hands. The board members didn't look at her. They looked at me. I stood slowly, the sound of my chair scraping deliberate. I gathered the folder, pressed the flap closed, and looked once around the table. I didn't take anything, I said, voice even. She gave it. That's different. I didn't wait for rebuttal. I turned, walked out, and left the heat of their silence behind me. The silence in my apartment felt louder than the boardroom had. I loosened my tie slowly, tugging it free from the stiff collar like it had been choking me all day. The kettle clicked on, steam rising from the spout as I leaned against the counter. Through the kitchen window, the city stretched out in a blur of late afternoon gray. My phone lit up on the table. No messages, not from Clayton, not from anyone. I hadn't expected celebration, but the absence still stung. I reached for the mug Brielle once gifted me, plain ceramic, navy blue, chipped at the handle. It used to sit on her desk. The image of Clayton in that boardroom kept returning, his eyes glassy, his voice hoarse, yet sharp enough to cut through a decade of silence. You let her die, and now you take her company too? No one answered him, not even Melora. She sat frozen, hands clenched in her lap, lips pursed so tightly they turned pale. I had said nothing, just stood, gathered the folder Quentin had handed me, walked out. Maybe that was its own answer. I sipped the tea, too hot, too bitter, but it grounded me. Then, as if on instinct, I moved to the hallway closet and pulled out the old laptop, Brielle's, from when we still lived on Ash Street. She had left it with me years ago, saying, in case you ever want to look back. At the time, I didn't. Tonight, I did. I set it on the table, plugged in the cord, pressed the power button. The screen flickered, slow and hesitant, like waking from a long nap. The login screen appeared, asking for a password. I typed our anniversary. No. Her mother's maiden name. No. Her dog's name. Still nothing. On the fourth attempt, I typed, Lowell 1973. The screen unlocked. A part of me wished it hadn't. The desktop was cluttered, spreadsheets, meeting notes, financial forecasts, but one folder caught my eye, titled simply, Founding Notes. I opened it. Inside were scans of handwritten drafts, early sketches, rough logos. What my handwriting, my pen strokes, things I'd long forgotten I'd helped shape. Our mission statement, dated and signed by both of us. She hadn't replaced it. She'd built on it. I kept clicking. Buried deeper, in a drafts folder meant for email, was one message never sent. Subject, just so you know. It was addressed to Melora. I kept his name on the password. I never told you because it wasn't yours to know. This company came from both of us. Don't rewrite that. My hand trembled slightly on the trackpad. The letter wasn't angry. It wasn't even bitter. It was quiet, resigned, protective. I closed the laptop slowly. I didn't feel vindicated. Not exactly. But I felt remembered. Not as the man she left. Not as the one who watched her rise from the sidelines. As the man she built something with. The sun slipped through my curtains with the casual indifference of another ordinary morning. But I knew better. Nothing about today was ordinary. The blinking light on my phone was the first clue. Dozens of missed calls, messages from names I hadn't seen since Clayton's graduation. And then, a knock on the door. Lowell, my neighbor Martha said, holding her iPad, face tight with urgency. You might want to check Facebook. I hesitated. Social media had never been my arena, but her face said it wasn't optional. The video had nearly 500,000 views already, grainy footage from a funeral attendee's phone. There I was, standing quietly, when Melora shoved past me with a glare. The caption read, "This is how they treated her husband of 30 years. The comments hit harder than any headline. He deserved better. What kind of people erase someone's life like that? I set the phone down, not out of shock, but a strange, silent vindication. Later that morning, Quentin called. "I think you should see this," he said, voice low. "There's a voice memo. Brielle recorded it 6 months ago." It was sealed, until now. He forwarded the file. My hand trembled slightly as I pressed play. Brielle's voice filled my living room, clear, deliberate, no bitterness, just truth. If this is being played, it means Melora tried to control more than she should have. She has her talents, but she couldn't see the past as anything but a threat. Lowell was my beginning. You can't erase where you started and expect the house to stay standing. My eyes closed as her voice settled around me like a worn sweater. She had known. She had planned for this. By noon, the news cycle caught up. Corporate heiress accused of manipulating widow's legacy. Donors pulled statements. Partnerships dissolved quietly. Melora had no comment. Clayton, not a word. I didn't need it. That afternoon, I walked back to the chapel, alone this time. The air was softer now, less staged. At the guest book, I saw someone had written, "Truth always finds breath." I took Brielle's original letter, the one she'd left with Quentin, and slipped it beneath the last page. If anyone wanted the truth, they could find it now. No lawyers, no conditions. Back home. An envelope from the board waited on the table. I opened it without urgency. "We'd be honored to have you keynote the Legacy Leadership Summit next month." I smiled and folded it shut. Instead, I picked up the phone and called Emory School. When the receptionist answered, I cleared my throat. "Hi, I'd like to volunteer for Career Day." That evening, I sat by the window as the street lamp blinked on. The neighborhood was still, for the first time in months. So was I. A ping broke the silence, a message from a board member. "You were never just a footnote. You were the first sentence." I didn't smile, but I finally exhaled. The envelope from Emory's School was cream-colored, thicker than usual, handwritten, real. Inside, a single sheet. "You are cordially invited to Career Community Day. Your granddaughter, Emory Flores, has nominated you to present. Please RSVP." I read it twice, then once more. My first instinct was hesitation. This was her world, Brielle's legacy, Clayton's shadow, Melora's influence. Mine was coffee-stained forms and half-finished decks. What could I say to a room full of children who thought heroism wore capes? But I said yes anyway. The auditorium smelled like glue sticks and ambition. Posters lined the walls. My dad is a pilot. My mom fixes hearts. My aunt is a firefighter. One featured a proud 6-year-old beneath a crayon rocket labeled NASA. Emory met me backstage. "You okay?" she asked. "I think so," she grinned. "I told them you wouldn't need a slideshow." She went up first. Her voice wasn't loud, but clear. "My hero doesn't wear a badge or fly a plane. He doesn't talk much about what he's done, but he's the one who stayed, even when people tried to pretend he didn't exist. He didn't leave, even when it hurt to stay. That's what real heroes do." Then she looked at me and smiled. I didn't cry, but something inside me finally let go. After the applause, I walked to the front. I didn't talk about business or legacy or control. I talked about how important it is to show up when it matters, and to keep showing up even when no one says thank you. I got polite applause, but Emory's smile was worth more. Outside, in the parking lot, the air was colder. Clayton stood by my car, hands in his coat pockets. He looked smaller than I remembered. "I wasn't ready for what Mom left us," he said. I overreacted. I didn't respond. He tried again. "I want to make this right." I watched his face, the way he shifted his weight from one foot to the other. No anger. No entitlement, just fatigue and maybe guilt. You want to make it safe, I said. For you, that's not the same as making it right. He looked away. I didn't know about the letter, he added. I didn't know about the password. I believed him, but belief isn't the same as forgiveness. You don't fix betrayal with coffee, I said quietly. You fix it with years. Start there. He nodded slowly, eyes on the pavement. Then he walked to his car without another word. Back home. I took off my coat. Something crinkled in the pocket. A folded piece of paper. Emery's handwriting. A drawing. Me in a cape and crown. Standing next to her. Stick figures both. The caption read, "The man who didn't give up." I placed it on the fridge, beside the last photo of Brielle and me from before things changed. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with a legal pad, wrote a letter to the board. If legacy means power, I'll lead. If it means clarity, I'll guide, then step aside. We choose what our names mean. Starting now, I choose. I folded it, sealed it, and set it by the door. Maybe I'd deliver it, maybe not, but this time, the decision was mine. The boardroom didn't look different, but it felt different. The same chairs, the same polished table, the same view of downtown Spokane through a floor-to-ceiling window, faintly smudged from the last rain. But this time, my name was on the placard. Chairman, L. Brancato. Quentin nodded as I entered. The other board members straightened in their seats, not stiff, just attentive. Melora sat to the far right, lips pressed tight, her blazer still flawless, but she didn't speak. Clayton wasn't there. "Shall we begin?" Quentin asked. A proposal was pushed forward early, a pivot in strategy, subtle in language, but clear in intention. Expand aggressively into sectors that bore Melora's stamp. No discussion. Just quiet assumptions. I lifted the bylaws, flipped to the tab marked in yellow. Line 47B, I said, tapping the text. Chairman's discretionary veto. The room went silent. No, I said evenly. That ends here. Nobody moved. Nobody challenged it. By the time we reached the final item on the agenda, Melora's resignation was presented as a formality. But I saw it. Her fingers clenched so tight the knuckles went white. Her shoulders rose, fell, but she said nothing, just signed. Outside the building, a young reporter called out as I stepped to the curb. "Is this justice?" I paused. "No," I said. "It's the end of pretending." That night, I sat in the third row at Emery's school play. She played a tree, smiling wide, arms raised like branches. She spotted me in the crowd and waved subtly, one hand still tucked in a paper leaf glove. After the show, in the hallway, she ran to me and hugged my waist. "Do you miss Grandma?" she asked softly. "Every day," I said. But she left me something even stronger than memories. She blinked up at me. Truth. Back home. The porch light buzzed faintly. Among the mail was a plain cream envelope, no return address. Inside, a single line on familiar stationery. She was right to choose you. Beneath that, a photocopy of a journal page. Brielle's handwriting. Neat, but slanted. As if written in one sitting. Lowell never left me. I did. I stood in the living room, the light catching the frame that now held the original founding document of Flores Consulting. My name and hers, side by side again. We built it. She remembered. And now, finally, I believed her. They tried to write me out. She wrote me back in. Justice isn't revenge. It's restoration. And forgiveness, when earned, is the most powerful form of survival.